Thank you so very much, ma'am, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the Dr. Mohan's International Diabetes Update. We started with some novel gene discovery, complex genetics, but now we're coming to something that everyone loves, and that is food. Right? Everyone wants to know about the diet. What can I eat, doctor? What can I not eat? Yes, always popular. So let's move on to this topic, which is new insights on India's metabolic NCD and the favorite one, dietary profile. I have no conflict of interest to declare, but the presentation does contain some unpublished data, so please do not take photographs or copy this in any way. So this is an update of the ICMR India Diabetes Study, or INDIAB study for short. A government-funded study, the ICMR and the Department of Health Research, Government of India, that has been going on for the last 15 years or so. India is a massive country, 1 billion people. How do you sample a country like this, state by state by state? It's taken us 15 years to do so. These are the phases and the states. We have in the study now 1,21,000 individuals. So let's get to it. The metabolic health. This was a paper that was published in Lancet Diabetes Endocrinology in 2023 that declared how much of diabetes was there in the country. We reported an overall diabetes prevalence of 11.4%, which is 101 million people with diabetes in the country. But just like everything else in India, diabetes is also completely heterogeneous. Now look at these maps here. Overall, these are color-coded maps. The diabetes prevalence of 10% and above is represented as red. 7.5 to 9.9 is orange. 5 to that 7.5 is yellow, and below 5 is green. So look at the country overall. The southern parts of the country and some parts of north have higher prevalence, whereas you see a nice midsection that has the lower prevalence of diabetes. However, if you look at urban India as a whole, almost the whole country is in red, and that is of significance. Now let's look at pre-diabetes. We all know pre-diabetes is on the pathway to diabetes. Traditional teaching says that if someone has pre-diabetes, 1/3 of these individuals progress, 1/3 regress, and 1/3 stay the same. That's traditional teaching. But in India, we show that 60% of people with pre-diabetes actually progress onwards towards diabetes. Now in that context, look at these maps. What do they look at? They look like the opposite of the diabetes map, with the high prevalence of 15% and above in red in the central region. So they are opposites of each other. Where the pre-diabetes is high, the diabetes is low, and vice versa. So what this tells you is that the central region of the country, which has a maximum populace, are all going to convert to diabetes, a veritable kind of ticking time bomb for diabetes numbers in this country. The other thing we see about Asian Indian diabetes is a very low age of onset of diabetes. You take any Caucasian white population, people start getting diabetes only 50 years plus. But this is data from INDIAB. Red is urban area, green is rural area, the dotted lines are the women, and the straight lines are the men. Doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what your sex is, age of onset of diabetes in this country is shifted to the left, age group of 25 to 34 years. So young onset diabetes will have to live a whole lifespan with the disease. The other thing that we see is diabetes at lower BMI. So everybody talks about young people, if they're Caucasians and they're young, they're obese when they get diabetes. But in our country, they're lean. So look at the BMI onset. It's 18 to 19.9. So 20 years, BMI, they start getting diabetes. We also show that we have a particular lean diabetes phenotype, which has a BMI of less than 18.5. So they're really, really lean. So all of this comes together. They're younger, they're leaner, the diabetes is aggressive, and this is what we have in our country. So I've established right now, we have a lot of diabetes and pre-diabetes. What happens then? Let's look at metabolic control, the A, B, and C of diabetes care. How are we doing with A1Cs? What percentage of the population has an A1C of less than 7%? It's only 35% of the population. So that means we have a large number of people with diabetes, and a large number of those are uncontrolled. That is not good news. What about blood pressure? 50%-ish of people with blood pressure in both urban and rural areas do have their blood pressure less than 140/90 mmHg. Here are the lipids. So you have the total cholesterol, triglyceride, and the LDLs. So we're doing well with cholesterol, about 60%, triglyceride and LDL also given there. So this is another component of the Asian Indian phenotype: lower BMI, lower age of onset, higher triglyceride, and low HDL. So all of this comes together in this very unique type of diabetes that we call the South Asian or Asian Indian phenotype. So what have we established so far? Lots of diabetes, not very good control. So where does that take you? It takes you straight to microvascular disease. So here's the prevalence of impaired kidney function from the INDIAB study. This is the first national data on IKF. This has just been accepted in the Indian Journal of Medical Research, IJMR. So what do we show here? We took people from INDIAB who had available creatinine levels, so that was 1 in 5 individuals, about 25,000 individuals, and divided them into 4 groups. Those who did not have diabetes or hypertension, that's group 1. Those who had only diabetes but no hypertension, that was group 2. Those who had only hypertension but no diabetes, that's group 3, and combined diabetes and hypertension was group 4. So we divided them into these 4 groups. Shown here is the prevalence of IKF across the country. I would just like to take a minute to say this is not diabetic kidney disease. We don't have proteinuria measurements in this. This is only the eGFR measurements that we are showing here, and that's why it's called impaired kidney function. You will see areas in red that's above 6% in some parts of the south and eastern parts of the country. So already this is appearing to be like a problem. But what we show here is actually the decline in GFR. So shown here is the annual and decadal decrease in GFR in the 4 groups which I mentioned before. So you do know that with age there is a declining in the eGFR. So that is the normal group. We have a normal group, right? So compared to that, how much is it declining in those with hypertension, diabetes, and combined? What would you expect? Traditional teaching says hypertension has the maximum effect on the kidney. Yeah, but here we show that actually diabetes has a very high effect on, obviously the worst is for the combined, but if you take hypertension versus diabetes, actually the diabetes effect is pretty dominant is what we're showing, and the decadal decrease is kind of accelerated in those with diabetes, especially if uncontrolled. Here are the odds ratios for the impaired kidney function. Look at the overall column at the end here. Can you see my pointer? Yes, you can. Right. So this is for hypertension. The numbers are higher for diabetes. That's what I was telling you right now. But the combined numbers become a whopping double prevalence of impaired kidney function. So what are we saying? We're saying uncontrolled diabetes, hypertension that's not controlled. Most people have both of these together. You're going to move into impaired kidney function pretty fast. So let's take a step back and now look at lifestyle risk factors. And the favorite one for today is diet. You're right. So we're very proud of this paper that's just gotten accepted in Nature Medicine. It's titled Dietary Profiles and Associated Metabolic Risk in India. It's just accepted, still in press. Let me tell you a little about the study and then more about the diet. So again, this is from INDIAB. We have taken people who had FFQs, so we had to do detailed food frequency questionnaires. So only 1 in 5 individuals, we were able to get that. So that was 22,000 individuals. The dietary assessment was available in about 20,000. After we did all the exclusion, we had 18,000 individuals in this study. So it's no surprise to say that India loves her carbohydrates. 60% of any Asian Indian's diet, doesn't matter where you live, north, south, east, west, doesn't matter if it's urban or rural, doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, you eat a lot of carbohydrate, right? You like your rice, or your rotis, or your pasta, or your noodle, or your bread, or whatever you do, it's carbohydrate. Right? We eat a lot of it. So that's what we show here across the country, and you can see the lovely pictures, all of which are carb rich. So now let's go on to the reported top cereals in the country. So shown here, the white areas in the southern and eastern and northeastern parts of the country are rice-eating belts in this country. 99% in the northeast reported rice as their primary cereal. In the south, it was 87%, and in the east, it was 78%. So this is the rice-eating belt, southeast, northeast. Now you have the west, center, and north. This is the wheat-eating belt, right? So everybody thinks rice is a refined grain. Wheat is a whole grain. So should we have diabetes prevalence also divided in the same manner? Yes, no, don't know. But I showed you the diabetes map. What did it look like? Did it look like this? No. So something wrong somewhere. Let's look at that in a little more detail. Shown here are the various regions in our country. So this is north, south, east, west, center, northeast. In each of these regions, the states are listed there. Here we have carbohydrate intake. So in the orange line here is total carbohydrate. Red is refined cereal, then you have milled whole grain and added sugar, which is in blue. So these are the lines and the numbers are given here. It's color coded. Red means highest, green means lowest. So that's how it is. So the overall carbohydrate intake was 62%. It was highest in the eastern region and lowest in the western region. So that is for overall carbohydrate. Now rice. Rice, we said, remember, northeast eats a lot of rice. So that's the highest intake. It's about 51.7% of rice intake compared to the north, which is 9%. So you go from 9 to 51% rice intake. Rice and wheat are kind of opposite of each other. Where rice is high, wheat is low. Where wheat is high, rice is low. So that you can see in the color coding maps. But what's interesting here is that even within a region, you have, let's take the rice line. So this is the red line here. You'll see that Tamil Nadu reports very high intake. This is within one region. So this is not inter-regional, it's intra-regional differences. Tamil Nadu is so high in rice. But then look at Karnataka. Correctly, Dr. Arvind walks in when I say Karnataka, right? So Karnataka, it has low intake of, it's within a region. So you can't say all of north takes wheat, all of south takes, you can't do that. Because even within a region, the state-wise differences are quite prominent. And that's what it's showing here. The last one in this slide is the added sugar intake. And this is something that we noticed came as quite a surprise. The highest intake of sugar overall is 7.9% in the northern region. Now, sugar intake should not exceed 5% of your total energy intake. But in the whole of the northern region, it's 7.9, it's really high. Whereas in the eastern region, you'll see 2.1, northeastern region, you'll see 2.1%. So you can see the variation, inter and intra-regional variation of carbohydrate intakes. We also talk a lot about millets. I've only told you about rice and wheat. We had an international year of millets that was discovered, announced by the government. So you'll think that a lot of people eat a lot of millets. But you will be surprised to know that only 3 states in the country report high millet consumption as defined as reported by more than 30% of their population. That is 3 states, Karnataka, Gujarat and Maharashtra. So these 3 states report quite high consumption of millets. Karnataka prefers sorghum and finger millet, 10% energy. Gujarat, pearl and maize, and Maharashtra, sorghum and pearl millet. So these are the millet. It's not very high overall. We still have predominance of rice and wheat being said. Now remember, we had a recommendation for sugar that said more than 5% energy. Well, let's look at which states are above this recommendation. All the states in the north except Chandigarh, all the states in the south except Tamil Nadu, have high sugar consumption. And then people ask, doctor, why is there so much diabetes? Please look at sugar consumption here, direct sugar this is. All the states of the East, West and Central, all have above 5% recommended energy. Only in the Northeast, the overall sugar consumption is low. Only one state, Meghalaya, reports above 5%. All other states in the Northeast report low consumption of sugar. So that's about carb. Let's move to fat. We know that our fat intake must be less than 30% and our saturated fat intake must be less than 10%. These are worldwide accepted recommendations. Now look at where we stand. Same regions, the fat, overall total fat is in yellow here. The saturated fat is in red, so that's easy to see. It's also in the boxes below. And then you have the MUFA and the PUFA. So the overall fat intake is okay. It's about 25%, which is within the recommended 30% limit across the country. We have high intakes in the western region. We have about 28%. Lowest intake is 22% in the northeast. So we're within the total. But what is the important one here? It's saturated fat. So we have to take within 10% of saturated fat, and there is even a recommendation that says for cardiometabolic health, saturated fat should be less than 7%. And here's where our troubles begin. These are all the states in the country that have more than 10% saturated fat intake. These are whole states that we have. North, almost all of the states are reporting high saturated fat intake. We have Andhra Pradesh, we have Gujarat, Goa, Mizoram and Sikkim. So this is 10. If you lower this to 7, almost all states in the country are above saturated fat intake. So here's our problem with fat. Now let's move to protein. So protein, not surprising, overall low, right? The overall percentage is 12%. We must be somewhere at 20%. We're at 12 nationally. The highest intakes of protein are in the northeastern region. The lowest are in the eastern region. In our country, the biggest contributor to protein intake is plant protein. So that is the biggest contributor at almost 9% of the 12% is plant. Dairy is 2% and animal protein is only 1%. Animal protein comes exclusively from the northeast here. Northeast reports 3% animal protein and the least is in the north. Dairy, on the other hand, very high prevalence in the north, 3.6%, very low in the northeast. So they're like inverse of each other, the animal protein and the dairy. When I say animal protein, we're talking about poultry, fish, egg, given here. And of course, plant protein is highest in the central region and lowest in the southern region. So that is the protein intake. We already established that the highest protein intake comes from the northeast, from the states of Nagaland, Mizoram, Manipur and Meghalaya. Dairy is high in Delhi, Haryana and Gujarat, and the highest contributor among animal protein is poultry. So chicken seems to be the commonly consumed poultry across the country. So that was about the profiles. We did carbohydrate, we did fat, and we did protein. Now we look at what happens if carbohydrate is taken as total carbohydrate, refined carbohydrate, milled whole grain, or added sugar. Those were the columns we saw earlier. What is the likelihood of type 2 diabetes region by region by region? What we show is that overall carbohydrate increases your risk of type 2 diabetes by about 12% at current consumption levels. Now this differs. Total carbohydrate is 14, added sugar is 14, if you take refined cereal, rice, it's 13, and milled whole grain is 9. So here we have the rice with wheat story. So why do you think? So we show here that rice has risk. What is the risk? It's 13%. So then, is wheat healthier? Is it protective? It's not. It's 9%. Right? So both have risk. And why is that like that? Any idea? Wheat is a whole grain, right? It should have protection against diabetes. Well, it is a whole grain in theory. But have you seen the wheat that you consume? It's refined. It's milled. It has small particle size. And you eat it with aloo masala. Right? So explain to me how it will be healthy. right? It has equal amount. If you eat the coarse grain, that's fine. But in diet, which has normal dietary patterns across the country, you will see that people have unhealthy milled wheat consumption, and thus it gives them increased likelihood of type 2 diabetes. What about pre-diabetes? Again, the risk is pretty much the same. It's 14% overall. It's 15 for total carbohydrate and added sugar, and for milled whole grain, it's about 12. So what we're trying to show here is all carbohydrates, rice, wheat, all of this, and of course the sugar, all of this together increases your risk for diabetes and pre-diabetes. It also increases your risk for generalized obesity as measured by BMI and abdominal obesity as measured by waist circumference by 13 and 12% respectively. Okay, so it's done all of the metabolic damage, the carbohydrate. So then we ask the question, what do we do about it? Right, we said 60% carbohydrate. So then we ask the question, what happens if you reduce 5%? Or in other words, if you do an isocaloric substitution of 5% of energy that's come from carbohydrate, you substitute it with something else. If carbohydrate goes down, you substitute it with either protein or fat. Correct? That's the only thing you can do. So now let's look at what happens. First is protein. So I'm going to show you here. We have total protein. The risk is protective. If you change carbohydrate to protein, total protein, protective. Plant protein, protective. Pulses and legume protein, protective. Dairy protein, protective. I repeat, dairy protein, protective. For all the nutritionists sitting in the audience and telling people don't drink milk, dairy protein is protective in our country, right? Fermented dairy, that's curd, protective. Non-fermented dairy, that's milk, protective. Okay, so there it ends. Animal protein and red meat, risk. It's showing risk. Whereas chicken, poultry protein, protective. Egg and fish, protective. Plant protein with dairy, protective. Animal protein and dairy, not protective. Okay? And then you have all the fats, total fat, saturated fat, MUFA, PUFA, everything is no protection, risk. Okay, so I think that substitution came out quite clearly. The upper panel here, this is for diabetes. The lower panel here is for pre-diabetes, and they are exactly the same. So what have we established? If you substitute 5% of energy from carbohydrate with protein from either plant, fish, egg or chicken, with dairy, the combination of the two having synergistic effects, you will have a lower likelihood of diabetes and pre-diabetes. The last part is the favorite part, and that talks about what about which type of cereal. Here we tried to substitute rice with wheat and looked at whether there was any effect on diabetes, pre-diabetes, obesity, and we show there's absolutely no effect. So what we conclude is that changing from one carbohydrate to another carbohydrate is not helping, but changing from carbohydrate to something else like protein, I think has the most beneficial effect. Changing to fat increases your risk. So that, I think, was the paper. I would like to conclude by saying the ICMR in Diabetes study highlights we have an enormous burden of NCDs in this country. People do not have their A1Cs, blood pressure or cholesterol under control. The burden of impaired kidney function across the country is high, perhaps very much due to the high type 2 diabetes that we have. We have a lot of carbohydrate in this country. Saturated fat consumption is high. We have very low protein intake. Only 3 states recommended good intake of dairy protein, and the highest not. So Northeast has a very unique situation. They have the highest refined cereal intake, but they have the lowest diabetes because they also have the highest protein intake. So that's how you kind of manage it. Even if you take high carbohydrate, you add the protein onto it, it lowers the diabetes risk. So replacing 5% of carbohydrate from plant, dairy, egg, fish protein was associated with lower risk of new onset diabetes and pre-diabetes. These have multiple implications for policy. The first thing to do is awareness. People need to know what to substitute with what. That is the first thing. Public health strategies should be practical and sustainable. Don't tell someone to just go off carb completely. They'll do it for a month, 2, 3. What happens after that? For the rest of their life, whatever they can do, small sustainable changes is what we should be talking about. Fats need to become healthier. So healthier edible oils, low in saturated fat. Our public distribution systems, unfortunately, what do you get there? Rice, sugar, oil. Right? We need to do something about that. We need to talk to our policymakers, see that we are giving minimum support prices scheme for protein sources, pulses, legumes, things like that. And as healthcare is a state government matter, these studies are vital for helping us to prevent the epidemic of diabetes in this country. Jai Hind.
Any questions from the audience, please?
You could write it down, sir. Please, yeah. Write down your questions, and he has the question, not me. Oh, you have to give it to them. Yeah.
And by the time we wait for the questions, I would really like to congratulate you to share about population dietary intake and to put it forth so very well is really amazing. And years of work going into this
lots of work. I especially have to thank the team that has been working really hard. The diet team, Mrs. Sudha Vasudevan, Manasa, and the entire team are sitting here. They did all the work. I'm just doing the presentation, really.
The first question is why fiber diet is not included in your study, which is a very integral role.
The fiber, actually we've published on this before. So in the macronutrient recommendation, we say that carb should be about 50%, protein is about 20, fat is about 25, and that last 5% is actually fiber. In this particular analysis, we were only looking at it by the main macronutrients. So yes, fiber is an integral part of it. It's just that we haven't put it in this analyses.
Difference between different kinds of rice, especially the white and the brown rice profile?
Yeah. So this is something that I get asked a lot. So people ask not just white and brown, they ask about red, black, pigmented, all of those types of rice. So please remember, when you get the paddy, if you remove the husk, the remaining thing is the brown rice. So it has multiple coats and layers, and that has all of the nutrients in it, the fiber and all of the stuff that's good, that is brown rice. If you remove all those layers, the starchy endosperm is the white rice. Now pigmented rice are just various genetic variants. They are still refined rice. So even if you take any of the color rices, they are still refined if all the coats have been removed. Any form of rice that has all the intact seed coats, that is what is called brown, and there can be many types of or forms of brown rice, all of which are healthy.
The next is ADA has withdrawn the restriction of saturated fat to 10. The recommended only restricting total fat to 30%. So your take
So
on
I
that?
don't think we agree with that, because our saturated fat has directly been linked to multiple components of the metabolic syndrome. As a matter of fact, for Indians, we have moved it from 10 to 7%. We have recommendations in India that talk about 7%. So yes, because it's a very integral part of what we eat, and it definitely does have metabolic risks. So in India, it's not 10, perhaps it's 7, and it does exist.
Please guide on recommendations of choices of oil and what would be the substitutes?
So we haven't done the oil substitution in this one. It is a separate topic. But in general, what we find is the traditional oils, the mustard oil seems to be quite good. The sunflower oil, which is native to Tamil Nadu state, is one of the most unhealthiest oils. Whereas peanut oil, mustard oil, traditional oils are better, gingerly, stuff like that, are better rather than the ones, and of course coconut oil is a lot of saturated fat. But the overall recommendation is to mix oils. Use either blended oils or mix up the oils. Of course, things like olive oil are great, but who can afford olive oil? So, make it such that you're using different oils for different things, because each oil gives a different kind of nutrient.
I think you are just loaded with a lot of questions.
Diet, remember? India loves diet.
Absolutely. Last, a suggestion from Dr. C.B. Mishra is that medical associations should start preventive programs within the schools itself.
I agree.
And I think
I completely agree. And I think that is the purpose of things like this, that there's awareness and this policy and this action following data like this.
There are still a lot of questions.
I'm happy to take questions on the floor.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to say that